The auctioneer's hammer struck 3 times against the weathered podium, and Beatrice Kensington felt each blow like a physical wound to her chest, as another crate of books disappeared into the hands of strangers. It was 1876 in Petaluma, California, and the small-town library she had nurtured for 3 years stood nearly empty, its shelves bare except for the dust outlines where volumes had once rested. The debt had come from nowhere, or rather, it had come from everywhere at once. Her father's gambling debts, discovered only after his death 6 months prior, had fallen upon her shoulders like an avalanche. The bank had been sympathetic but firm. Everything of value had to go, and in a town where most folks could barely read their own names, books were considered a luxury few understood. Beatrice stood in the corner of the library's main room, her dark blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, her plain brown dress buttoned to her throat despite the California heat. She was 23 years old and watching her entire world crumble. The books had been her companions, her students, her purpose. Without them, she was merely another unmarried woman in a town that had little use for such creatures. $50 for the lot, called a voice from the back of the room. Beatrice's head snapped up. The crowd of perhaps 20 people turned to look at the speaker. He stood in the doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun, his silhouette tall and broad-shouldered. As he stepped forward, removing his dusty hat, Beatrice could make out his features more clearly. He was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of aged whiskey. His face was sun-bronzed and honest-looking, with a strong jaw and a mouth that seemed more accustomed to smiling than frowning. "That's for all remaining lots," he clarified, his voice carrying easily through the room. It was a warm voice, roughened slightly by trail dust and outdoor living, but educated somehow. Not the voice she expected from a man wearing dusty riding clothes and worn boots. The auctioneer, a thin man named Silas Worthy, adjusted his spectacles. "Sir, we're selling these items separately. There are at least 15 more crates here." "I'm aware," the stranger said, pulling a leather wallet from his vest pocket. $50 for everything remaining." "I'll pay cash now." A murmur rippled through the crowd. $50 was more than most of these people saw in half a year. Beatrice found herself stepping forward without conscious thought. "Why would you want them?" she asked, her voice catching slightly. "You don't even know what's in those crates." The stranger's eyes found hers, and something flickered in their depths. Recognition, perhaps, though Beatrice was certain they had never met. She would have remembered this man. "Because they're books, madam," he said simply. "And books deserve better than being sold piecemeal to folks who will use them for kindling." "That's not your concern, mister," Silas interjected, "but your money is certainly welcome. Mr. Worthington, do you have the funds present?" Beatrice blinked. Worthington. The name was familiar. There were Worthingtons up in the northern part of the county, ranchers who had done well for themselves in cattle. But she had never seen this man before. "It's Vaughn," the stranger said, counting out bills onto the podium. "Vaughn Norton. And yes, I have the funds." Beatrice's breath caught. Not Worthington, then. Norton was a name she knew less well, though she had heard it mentioned in connection with a smaller ranch operation east of town. The man before her did not look like he had money to spare. Yet he was counting out crisp bills with the casualness of someone for whom $50 was not a fortune. The transaction completed quickly after that. The remaining bidders dispersed, clearly disappointed but unwilling to compete with such a substantial offer. Beatrice stood frozen as Vaughn Norton signed the necessary papers and shook hands with Silas Worthy. When the auctioneer finally departed, promising to return the next day to complete the building's sale, Beatrice found herself alone with the stranger and 15 crates of books. "You didn't have to do that," she said, hating how her voice trembled. "They're just going to sell the building anyway." "There's nowhere to put them." Vaughn settled his hat back on his head and studied her with those unsettling amber eyes. "You're Beatrice Kensington," he said. "It was not a question." "How did you know? Small town. People talk." "They say Robert Kensington's daughter has been running the library, trying to teach reading to anyone who'll listen." He paused. "They also say she's about to lose everything because her father couldn't stay away from the poker tables in San Francisco." Beatrice's cheeks flamed. "My father's mistakes are not suitable conversation for strangers." "No, madam, you're right. I apologize." Vaughn moved closer, and Beatrice caught the scent of leather and sage and something else, something clean like soap. "But his mistakes shouldn't cost you your life's work either." "Noble words from someone who just purchased my books for a fraction of their worth." A smile tugged at the corner of Vaughn's mouth. "I purchased them to keep them safe. There's a difference. Safe where? In your barn, on your ranch while they mildew and rot." "On shelves," Vaughn said calmly. "Proper shelves, built to last." Beatrice stared at him. "I don't understand. Come with me," he said, gesturing toward the door. "I want to show you something." Every instinct told her to refuse. She did not know this man, and proper young women did not go wandering off with strangers, no matter how honest their eyes appeared. But curiosity won over propriety, as it so often did with Beatrice. She had always been too curious for her own good, her father used to say. They walked through the dusty streets of Petaluma, past the general store and the saloon, past the church where Beatrice sometimes played piano on Sundays for extra money. Vaughn's horse, a handsome bay gelding, was tied outside the library. He untied the animal and led it along as they walked, not mounting, seemingly content to walk at Beatrice's pace. "You're not from Petaluma," she said after a few minutes of silence. "No, madam. I've been here about 4 months, bought a piece of land east of town near the river." "The old Henderson place. That's the one. Though it needed considerable work when I arrived, still does, truth be told." "Where are you from originally?" "Massachusetts," Vaughn said, and suddenly the education in his voice made sense. "Boston, specifically." "My family has shipbuilding interests there." Beatrice stopped walking. "Then what on earth are you doing in California buying ranches and books?" Vaughn's expression shifted, something darker passing through his eyes. "Running away, I suppose, though that sounds more dramatic than the truth." "My older brother inherited the business. My younger brother joined the clergy. I was the middle son with no clear purpose, so I came west to find one." "And have you found a purpose?" "I'm beginning to think I might have," he said, meeting her gaze with an intensity that made her look away. They continued walking until they reached the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open land. Here, the earth rolled in gentle hills covered with golden grass and scattered oaks. A narrow road led east, and Beatrice could see a cluster of buildings in the distance, perhaps a mile away. "That's the Henderson place," Vaughn said. "Or my place now, I suppose. I've been fixing up the main house, building new corrals. But there's a building there, a good solid structure that old Henderson used for storage. It has a sound roof, good windows, wooden floors. It's empty now." Beatrice's heart began to beat faster. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'd like to turn it into a library," Vaughn said simply. "A proper one, with shelves built specifically for books and a reading area and enough space for the collection to grow, but I can't do it alone. I don't know the first thing about organizing a library, or what books should be available, or how to help people learn to read." "You want me to run a library on your property?" "I want you to run your library," Vaughn corrected. "I'm just providing the space and the shelves." The books are yours. Well, technically they're mine now, but I'm prepared to donate them to the Norton Public Library of Petaluma, provided you agree to serve as its librarian. Beatrice's mind reeled. It was too much, too generous, too impossible. I can't accept charity, Mr. Norton. It's not charity. I'll pay you a salary, $30 a month to start, and you can live in the house. There's a spare room on the ground floor with its own entrance. You'd have privacy and respectability. Live in your house. Are you mad? The scandal would be enormous. Vaughn's jaw tightened slightly. I hadn't considered that aspect. You're right, of course. Perhaps we could build you a separate cottage. It would take a few months, but, Mr. Norton, please stop. Beatrice held up a hand. This is all very kind, but surely you understand how inappropriate this all sounds. An unmarried woman living on an unmarried man's property, working for him, accepting his money and his books and his charity. Then marry me. The words fell into the space between them like stones into a still pond. Beatrice actually stumbled, catching herself against a fence post. I beg your pardon. Vaughn's face had gone slightly red, but his gaze remained steady. I apologize. That came out wrong. What I meant to say is that if the impropriety bothers you, marriage would solve that problem. It would be a practical arrangement. You could have your library, I could help preserve something worthwhile, and we would both benefit from the partnership. Partnership, Beatrice repeated faintly. You're proposing a marriage of convenience to a woman you met 20 minutes ago so she can run a library on your ranch. When you say it like that, it does sound rather absurd, Vaughn admitted. A smile flickered across his face. But is it really more absurd than watching books be sold for kindling, than seeing you lose everything because of debts that weren't your making? Beatrice turned away from him, staring out at the golden hills. Her mind was spinning. The man was clearly insane. She should walk away immediately, return to town, find some other solution to her problems. Perhaps she could find a position as a governess or a teacher. Perhaps she could move to San Francisco and seek employment there. But even as she thought these things, she knew the reality. Positions were scarce, especially for women with no family connections and a father who had died in disgrace. And the books, her precious books, would be scattered to the winds. Some had already been sold to people who would never read them. The thought made her chest ache. You don't even know me, she said quietly. No, Vaughn agreed, but I'd like to, and in the meantime I know you care about books. I know you've been trying to educate people in a town that doesn't always value education. I know you're in an impossible situation through no fault of your own. That's enough for me to want to help. Why? Beatrice turned to face him. Why do you care? Really? Vaughn was quiet for a long moment. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the road, and somewhere a meadowlark sang. Finally, he said, My mother loved books. She died when I was 12, and the thing I remember most about her was how she always had a book in her hands. She taught all three of us boys to read before we were 5 years old. She believed that books were a kind of freedom. He paused, his gaze distant. When she died, my father locked up her library, said it hurt too much to see her things. Those books stayed locked away for years, unread, gathering dust. By the time I was old enough to break into that room, the damp had gotten to them. Mold, mice, ruin. All those books she loved just destroyed by neglect. Beatrice felt something shift in her chest. I'm sorry. So when I heard about the library auction, about books being sold off, I thought maybe I could keep that from happening to someone else's collection, to someone else's passion. And then I saw you standing there, watching your world disappear piece by piece, and I just knew I had to do something. So you bought 15 crates of books and proposed marriage to a stranger. In essence, yes. Despite everything, Beatrice felt a laugh bubbling up in her throat. It emerged half-strangled, bordering on hysterical. "You are either the kindest man I've ever met or the most foolish." "Probably both," Vaughn said, and this time his smile was full and genuine. It transformed his entire face, making him look younger and somehow more real. "But the offer stands. Marry me, run the library, help me turn that old storage building into something worthwhile. If after a year you're miserable, we can have the marriage quietly dissolved. I have a lawyer in San Francisco who could arrange it discreetly." "You've really thought this through." "I've been thinking about the library for weeks, ever since I heard about the debt. The marriage idea is admittedly newer, but it makes practical sense." Beatrice looked down at her hands. They were ink-stained as always, her fingers calloused from turning pages and shelving books. These were not the hands of a woman who would make a good rancher's wife. But then, Vaughn Norton did not seem to be looking for a traditional wife. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need. Well, within reason. The building sale is scheduled for next week, and once they sell it, you'll lose the space regardless." "Mr. Norton, you are not helping your case by pressuring me." "You're right again, I apologize." Vaughn adjusted his hat. "How about this? Come see the building tomorrow, see what you'd be working with, then make your decision. No pressure, no obligations. I'll have Mrs. Chen from the general store come along as a chaperone if it would make you more comfortable." Mrs. Chen was a formidable Chinese woman who ran the general store with her husband. She was also one of the few people in town who had never judged Beatrice for her father's failures. The offer of a chaperone showed that Vaughn understood propriety, even if his proposal had been wildly improper. "All right," Beatrice heard herself say. "Tomorrow afternoon, with Mrs. Chen present." "Tomorrow afternoon," Vaughn agreed. He tipped his hat to her. "Until then, Miss Kensington." He swung up onto his horse with easy grace and rode off toward his ranch, leaving Beatrice standing in the dusty road wondering if she had lost her mind. That night, Beatrice lay in her small room above the now empty library and stared at the ceiling. She had sent word to Mrs. Chen, who had agreed to accompany her the next day with curiosity gleaming in her dark eyes. Now, in the quiet darkness, Beatrice allowed herself to truly consider Vaughn Norton's incredible offer. Marriage had never been in her plans. She had watched her mother wither under the weight of her father's selfishness, had seen how marriage could trap a woman in misery. But this would be different, wouldn't it? A partnership, Vaughn had called it. A practical arrangement that would allow her to continue her work while providing her with security and respectability. And if she was being honest with herself, there was something about Vaughn Norton that intrigued her. The way he had spoken about his mother and her books, the clear pain in his eyes when he described their ruin. The impulsive generosity that had led him to spend $50 on books he did not need. The surprising proposal delivered with such earnest practicality. She fell asleep still thinking about amber eyes and the promise of empty shelves waiting to be filled. The next afternoon arrived hot and clear. Mrs. Chen arrived at the library in her practical black dress, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. She studied Beatrice with shrewd eyes. "This man, he is honorable?" she asked in her precise English. "I believe so," Beatrice said. "Though I hardly know him. We will see. I am good judge of character. Come, we should not be late." They walked to the edge of town where Vaughn was waiting with a wagon. He helped both women up with careful courtesy, and they set off toward his ranch. As they drew closer, Beatrice could see that considerable work had already been done. New fences lined the property, corrals stood ready for horses and cattle, and the main house, while clearly old, had been repaired and painted white. "This place, it looks much better than before," Mrs. Chen observed. "You have worked hard, Mr. Norton." "Thank you, madam. I have help from a few ranch hands who come in weekly. But yes, it's been a labor." He drove them past the main house to a building that stood about 50 yards away. It was constructed of good, solid wood with a stone foundation, perhaps 30 feet long and 20 feet wide. Large windows let in generous light, and when Vaughn unlocked the door, Beatrice saw that the interior was clean and spacious. "Henderson used it for feed storage mostly," Vaughn explained, "but the previous owner built it well. The roof is sound, the floor is level, and those windows face north, so you won't get harsh direct sunlight fading the book spines." Beatrice stepped inside and her breath caught. She could see it so clearly. Shelves along the walls, reading tables in the center, perhaps a desk near the door where she could sit and help visitors. The space was more than adequate. It was perfect. "You have thought much about this," Mrs. Chen said, echoing Beatrice's own thoughts. "I want it done right," Vaughn said simply. "If Miss Kensington agrees, I'll have the shelves built within 2 weeks. I have a friend in town, George Miller, who's an excellent carpenter. He's already drawn up some plans based on my descriptions." "You had plans drawn up before I even agreed." Vaughn had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I was optimistic or presumptuous, possibly both." Mrs. Chen walked around the space, examining the windows, testing the floorboards with her foot, running her hand along the walls. Finally, she nodded. "This is good space, very good. Miss Beatrice, I think you should consider this man's offer seriously." "Mrs. Chen, he's proposed marriage to a stranger." "Yes, I heard this from you, and I say, so what?" The older woman fixed Beatrice with a stern look. "You think love marriages are always better." "My marriage was arranged by my father when I was 17. I met my husband 1 week before wedding. Now we are married 30 years, and I love him more than my own life. Love can grow, Miss Beatrice, but opportunity does not always wait." Beatrice felt heat rise in her cheeks. "It's not just about love, it's about propriety and sense, and you are about to lose everything," Mrs. Chen interrupted gently. "Your books, your home, your purpose. This man offers you way to keep all three. Yes is unusual. Yes, people will talk, but people always talk. Better they talk about woman who runs library than woman who loses everything to dead father's debts." The words were harsh but true. Beatrice looked around the empty building again, then at Vaughn, who stood quietly by the door, his hat in his hands. "If I agreed," she said slowly, "what would you expect from this marriage, truly?" Vaughn met her gaze directly. "Respect, courtesy, partnership in creating something worthwhile. Beyond that, I would expect nothing you weren't freely willing to give. And if I'm never willing to give more than that, then we'll have a library and a respectful partnership. That's more than many marriages have." Mrs. Chen made a small approving sound. "This is good answer. Honest answer." Beatrice walked to one of the windows and looked out at the rolling hills beyond. The land here was beautiful, open and golden under the California sun. She could imagine herself here, among her books, teaching children and adults to read, building the kind of library she had always dreamed of. "I have conditions," she said, still looking out the window. "Name them," Vaughn replied. "First, the library must be truly public. Anyone who wishes to use it may do so, regardless of their station, race, or background." "Agreed." "Second, I maintain complete authority over the collection and its organization. You may make suggestions, but final decisions are mine." "Agreed." "Third, we maintain separate bedrooms. This marriage may be legal, but it will be a partnership only until and unless we both decide otherwise." There was a pause. Then Vaughn said quietly, "Agreed. Anything else?" Beatrice turned to face him. "If after 1 year either of us wishes to end the arrangement, we do so quietly and without rancor." You'll help me establish myself elsewhere if needed, and I'll ensure the library collection is properly transferred to whoever you choose to run it." "I agree to all your terms," Vaughn said. "Do we have an agreement, Miss Kensington?" Beatrice looked at Mrs. Chen, who nodded encouragingly. She looked around the empty building that would become her library. She thought of her books, rescued from being sold piecemeal, waiting to find their home on shelves that did not yet exist. She thought of her impossible situation, the debt she could never pay, the future that was rapidly disappearing. "Yes," she said, "we have an agreement." The smile that crossed Vaughn's face was like sunrise. "Then I believe congratulations are in order to both of us, Mrs. Chen clapped her hands together. "Good. This is very good. Now we must plan wedding. Small ceremony, yes. No need for big fuss." "As small as possible," Beatrice agreed, feeling slightly dazed. Had she really just agreed to marry a man she had known for less than 24 hours? "I'll speak with Reverend Thomas," Vaughn said. "Would Saturday be too soon?" "Saturday? That's 4 days away." "I know it's quick, but the building sale is Monday. If we're married by then, I can claim you as my dependent and possibly challenge the sale of your living quarters. Even if that fails, you'll have a home here." The practicality of it helped settle Beatrice's nerves. This was a business arrangement, a solution to a problem. The fact that her heart was racing and her palms were sweating was simply nervousness about such a large decision. "Saturday," she agreed. The next 4 days passed in a blur. Mrs. Chen took charge of the wedding preparations with the efficiency of a military general. She altered one of her own dresses for Beatrice to wear, a beautiful deep blue silk that brought out the color of Beatrice's eyes. She arranged for a simple ceremony in the church, invited only a handful of witnesses, and somehow managed to prepare a small reception dinner without Beatrice having to lift a finger. Vaughn, meanwhile, was a constant presence but never overwhelming. He met with the carpenter about the library shelves, arranged for the book crates to be transported to the ranch, and prepared the room that would be Beatrice's in the main house. He consulted her on every decision, from the height of the shelves to the color of paint for the library walls. "White," Beatrice said when he showed her the paint samples. "Bright white. It will make the space feel larger and keep it cool in summer." "White it is," Vaughn agreed, making a note. They were sitting in the hotel dining room, the only public place they could meet without scandal. Mrs. Chen sat at a nearby table, providing propriety while giving them enough distance to talk privately. "Are you having second thoughts?" Vaughn asked quietly. Beatrice considered lying, then decided against it. "Constantly, but I haven't changed my mind." "That's honest. I appreciate that." He paused. "For what it's worth, I'm nervous too. Are you? You seem so calm about everything." "I've learned to hide nervousness. Years of business meetings with my father's associates taught me that. But yes, I'm aware this is all highly irregular and possibly insane." "Possibly." Beatrice almost laughed. "Mr. Norton, we are definitely insane." "Vaughn," he corrected gently. "If we're to be married in 3 days, you should probably call me Vaughn." "Vaughn," she repeated, testing the name. "And you should call me Beatrice." "Beatrice." The way he said her name, with careful attention to each syllable, made something warm unfold in her chest. "It's a beautiful name. It means she who brings happiness, doesn't it? You know Latin, some. My mother insisted we study it. She said it was the foundation of understanding English properly." He smiled slightly. "She would have liked you, I think. She always respected women with minds of their own." "Tell me more about her," Beatrice said impulsively. Vaughn's expression softened. "She was from a working family originally. My father's parents were horrified when he chose to marry her, but she was the smartest person I've ever known. She could speak 4 languages, play piano and violin, and debate philosophy with any of my father's Harvard-educated friends. She made sure we boys understood that intelligence and worth were not determined by birth. She sounds remarkable. She was. Her death was sudden. A fever that came on fast and took her within days. My father never really recovered. He buried himself in work, and we boys were left to raise ourselves in many ways. I'm sorry. Losing a parent is difficult. Beatrice thought of her own father, of the complicated grief she still carried, even when that parent was flawed. Your father loved you, Vaughn said gently. Everyone I've spoken to has mentioned that. His gambling was a sickness, but it didn't mean he didn't care. Tears pricked Beatrice's eyes unexpectedly. How did you know I needed to hear that? Because I needed to hear something similar about my father once. After he locked away my mother's library, I hated him for years. It took a long time to understand that grief makes people do irrational things. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and Beatrice realized with some surprise that she felt at ease with this man. The nervousness was still there, but underneath it was something else. A tentative connection, the first threads of understanding. Tell me about the library, Vaughn said. How did you start it? My mother was a teacher before she married, Beatrice explained. She had a small collection of books, and she taught me to read very young. After she died when I was 15, I kept her books. When my father and I moved to Petaluma 3 years ago, I noticed the town had no library. So I used my mother's collection as a foundation and began soliciting donations. The building we were in was donated by old Mr. Peterson, who owned it but had no use for it. Over time, the collection grew. You built something from nothing. I tried, but without proper funding or support from the town council, it was always precarious. And then my father died and the debts came due and... She shrugged helplessly. You'll build it again, Vaughn said with quiet certainty. But this time it will have a solid foundation, and you won't be alone. The words hung between them, a promise and a comfort. Beatrice found herself believing him. Saturday arrived with golden sunshine and a cloudless sky. Beatrice dressed in Mrs. Chen's altered blue silk, her hands shaking only slightly as she fastened the small buttons. The Chinese woman had done wonders with the dress, taking it in to fit Beatrice's slimmer frame and adding delicate white lace at the collar and cuffs. You look beautiful, Mrs. Chen said, standing back to admire her work. Mr. Norton is lucky man. I'm not sure luck has anything to do with it, Beatrice replied, studying her reflection in the small mirror. She looked pale but composed, her dark blonde hair arranged in a simple style with small white flowers tucked into the braids. Everything has to do with luck, Mrs. Chen said wisely. But also with choice. You make good choice, I think. Now come, we must not be late to your own wedding. The ceremony was brief and simple. Reverend Thomas, a kindly man in his 60s, conducted the service with gentle efficiency. The witnesses included Mrs. Chen and her husband, George Miller the carpenter, and 2 of Vaughn's ranch hands. The church was nearly empty, which suited Beatrice perfectly. She had no desire for spectacle. Vaughn stood at the front of the church in a new black suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his expression serious. When Beatrice walked down the short aisle, his eyes widened slightly, and something that might have been wonder crossed his face. The Reverend led them through the traditional vows. When it came time for Vaughn to say, "I do," his voice was steady and clear. When Beatrice said the same words, she was surprised by the firmness in her own voice. This might be a practical arrangement, but she would honor it fully. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Thomas said with a smile. Vaughn hesitated, his eyes meeting Beatrice's in silent question. She gave a small nod and he leaned forward, pressing a brief, gentle kiss to her lips. It was her first kiss, and though it lasted barely a second, Beatrice felt it like a spark of electricity running through her entire body. Then it was done. She was Mrs. Vaughn Norton, wife to a man she barely knew, embarking on an arrangement that was either brilliant or completely mad. The small reception at the hotel was pleasant. Mrs. Chen had arranged for a simple meal, and the few guests offered their congratulations with genuine warmth. George Miller pulled Vaughn aside to discuss the library shelves, while Mrs. Chen regaled Beatrice with stories of her own wedding decades ago in China. As the sun began to set, Vaughn helped Beatrice into the wagon for the ride to their home. The reality of the situation settled over her like a heavy blanket. She was going to the ranch to live in Vaughn's house as his wife. Separate bedrooms or not, her entire life had changed in the space of a few days. "Are you all right?" Vaughn asked as they drove through the gathering dusk. "I'm not sure," Beatrice answered honestly. "This all feels very surreal." "It does," he agreed. "But for what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. I think we'll do good work together." "The library," Beatrice said, grasping onto the familiar topic. "When do you think the shelves will be ready?" "George says he can have them done within 10 days. He's already started cutting the wood. In the meantime, I thought we could begin organizing the books. Figure out what system you want to use for cataloging." They talked about the library for the rest of the drive, discussing classification systems and reading areas and how many people they might realistically expect to visit each week. It was easier than talking about their new marriage, safer than acknowledging the strangeness of their situation. The ranch house was warm and welcoming when they arrived. Vaughn had left lamps burning, and their light spilled out through the windows into the darkening evening. He helped Beatrice down from the wagon and led her inside. "Your room is here," he said, opening a door off the main hallway. "It was my mother's sitting room when this was my grandmother's house, years ago. It has its own entrance through that door there, so you can come and go privately if you wish." Beatrice stepped into the room and caught her breath. It was lovely, far nicer than anywhere she had lived in years. A large bed with a handmade quilt dominated one wall. A writing desk sat by the window, and a comfortable chair was positioned near a small fireplace. Her few belongings, brought over earlier by Mrs. Chen, were arranged neatly on the dresser. "The washroom is through there," Vaughn said, gesturing to another door. "You'll have to share it with me, I'm afraid, as it connects to my room as well, but I promise to respect your privacy." "It's wonderful," Beatrice said softly. "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me. This is your home now." Vaughn stood awkwardly in the doorway. "I'll let you settle in. I've left some cold supper in the kitchen if you're hungry. Breakfast is usually around 7, but please don't feel obligated to keep my schedule." "Vaughn," Beatrice said, turning to face him, "I know this is strange for both of us, but I want you to know I appreciate everything you've done, truly." His expression softened. "We're partners now, Beatrice. We'll figure this out together." He tipped an imaginary hat to her, a gesture so endearingly awkward that it made her smile. "Good night. Good night." After he left, Beatrice sat on the edge of her new bed and tried to process the day. She was married. She had a home. Her books were safe. Everything had changed so quickly that her mind could barely keep up, but underneath the disorientation was something else. A tiny seed of hope that maybe, just maybe, this impossible arrangement might actually work. The next morning, Beatrice woke early to sunlight streaming through her window and the sound of roosters crowing. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory returned, and with it, a flutter of nervousness. Her first full day as Mrs. Norton. She dressed quickly in a simple calico dress and ventured out of her room. The house was quiet, but she could smell coffee brewing. Following the scent to the kitchen, she found Vaughn standing at the stove cooking eggs. "Good morning," he said, looking up with a smile. "I hope you slept well." "Very well, thank you. You cook, out of necessity more than skill. My housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, comes 3 times a week to do the heavy cleaning and cooking, but on other days I fend for myself. I can manage eggs and bacon without burning them, which is about the extent of my culinary abilities." "I can cook," Beatrice offered. "It's not my favorite activity, but I'm competent." "We can take turns then, or cook together, whatever works best." He plated the eggs and set them on the small kitchen table. "Would you like to see the library building after breakfast? The paint arrived yesterday." They fell into an easy routine over the following days. Mornings were spent working on the library, painting the walls white as Beatrice had requested, cleaning the windows until they sparkled, and planning the layout of the shelves. George Miller arrived with his apprentice, a young man named Thomas, and began constructing the bookcases with methodical precision. "These will last 100 years, George said proudly, running his hand along a finished shelf. "Solid oak properly joined, no nails to rust or work loose." Beatrice watched the shelves take shape with growing excitement. They lined the walls from floor to ceiling, with a rolling ladder that would allow access to the higher shelves. George had included reading nooks in 2 corners, with built-in benches and good light from the windows. It was everything she had ever dreamed of. In the afternoons, Beatrice and Vaughn began the painstaking work of unpacking and organizing the books. They sat together in the library building, surrounded by open crates, sorting volumes into categories. "Look at this," Vaughn said, holding up a leather-bound copy of Shakespeare's complete works. "This is a beautiful edition." "It was my mother's," Beatrice said softly. "One of her most treasured possessions. She used to read the sonnets to me before bed. Then it should have a place of honor." Vaughn set it carefully aside. "We should create a special collection of rare or significant volumes. Keep them together where people can appreciate them properly." They worked in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the rustle of pages and the occasional comment about a book's condition or content. Beatrice found herself relaxing in Vaughn's presence, the initial awkwardness fading into something more comfortable. "Tell me about Boston," she said during a break when they were sitting on the front step of the library building sharing water from a canteen. "What was it like growing up there?" Vaughn leaned back against the doorframe, his eyes distant. "Busy, crowded, full of expectations. My father's family has been in shipbuilding for 3 generations. Everyone assumed all 3 of us boys would join the business. When my older brother showed real aptitude for it, and my younger brother declared for the clergy, I think my father didn't quite know what to do with me." "But you didn't want the shipbuilding business." "I didn't want to be the spare heir, waiting around in case my brother failed. It felt like a waste of a life. So when I turned 23, I told my father I was going west. He gave me enough money to buy land and told me to make something of myself." Vaughn smiled wryly. "I think he was relieved to have one less son to worry about. That must have been hard." "It was liberating, actually. For the first time, I could make my own choices, build my own life." He glanced at her. "What about you? Did you always want to be a librarian?" "I always loved books," Beatrice said. "But I think what I really wanted was to share that love, to help other people discover the magic of reading. My mother taught me that literacy is power, that knowing how to read gives you access to the entire world. I wanted to give that gift to others." "You have," Vaughn said quietly. "Mrs. Chen told me you taught her youngest son to read last year. He's working as a clerk in Sacramento now because of skills you gave him." Beatrice felt warmth spread through her chest. "I didn't know that. You've changed lives, Beatrice, and you'll change more once this library opens." The certainty in his voice moved her. She looked at this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known how to say. He was proving to be more than just a practical solution to her problems. He was becoming something that felt dangerously like a friend. 2 weeks after their wedding, the library was ready. The shelves stood complete, the books were organized and cataloged, and the reading area was furnished with comfortable chairs donated by various townspeople who had heard about the project. Vaughn had commissioned a sign from the local blacksmith, elegant wrought iron letters spelling out Norton Public Library. "It's perfect," Beatrice breathed, standing in the center of the room and turning slowly to take it all in. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes and making the book's spines glow with color. "You made it perfect," Vaughn corrected. "I just provided the building and the shelves." "You provided the vision," Beatrice said, "and the faith that it could be done." They stood together in the quiet library, and Beatrice felt a surge of emotion so strong it brought tears to her eyes. This was real. This was hers. After all the loss and fear and uncertainty, she had something solid and permanent. "Thank you," she whispered. "I know I've said it before, but thank you, Vaughn, for all of this." He reached out hesitantly and took her hand. It was the first time they had touched since their brief wedding kiss, and Beatrice felt that same spark of electricity. His hand was warm and calloused from work, and it engulfed hers completely. "Thank you," he said, "for taking a chance on a stranger's mad scheme, for bringing purpose to this place, for being here." They stood like that for a long moment, hands joined, surrounded by books and possibility. Something was shifting between them. Beatrice could feel it. The practical arrangement was beginning to feel like something more, something deeper and infinitely more complicated. The library opened to the public the following Monday. Beatrice had posted notices around town, and Mrs. Chen had spread the word among her customers. When Beatrice unlocked the doors at 9 in the morning, she was surprised to find nearly 20 people waiting outside. "Miss Beatrice, this is amazing," said Sarah Miller, George the carpenter's daughter. She was 15 and had been one of Beatrice's most dedicated students at the old library. "Can we really use any of these books?" "You can," Beatrice confirmed. "And it's Mrs. Norton now, though you may call me Mrs. Beatrice if you prefer." The girl's eyes widened as she looked around. This is like a palace for books. Over the course of that first day, nearly 50 people visited the library. Some came to browse, others to borrow books. Many simply came to marvel at the space and congratulate Beatrice on her marriage and her new establishment. Vaughn stayed in the background, helping people reach high shelves and moving chairs, but clearly trying not to overshadow Beatrice's moment. By the time they closed the doors at 5 o'clock, Beatrice was exhausted but elated. She had checked out 17 books, signed up 12 new members, and scheduled reading lessons for 4 children and 2 adults. "Today was incredible," she said as she and Vaughn walked back to the house in the evening light. "You were incredible," Vaughn replied. "The way you helped each person find exactly what they needed, the patience you showed with Mrs. Henderson who couldn't decide between 3 different novels. You're a born librarian, Beatrice." She felt herself blushing at the praise. "I'm just doing what I love." "That's what makes you good at it." They prepared dinner together that night, working side by side in the kitchen. Vaughn chopped vegetables while Beatrice prepared chicken, and they moved around each other with increasing familiarity. It was domestic and comfortable, and Beatrice found herself enjoying it more than she had expected. After dinner, they sat on the front porch watching the sun set over the hills. The evening air was cool and sweet with the scent of grass and wildflowers. Vaughn had brought out 2 glasses of whiskey and they sipped in comfortable silence. "I've been thinking," Vaughn said after a while. "The library is established now, Running well. If you wanted to dissolve our arrangement, I would understand. You could stay here as librarian and we could quietly annul the marriage. I would still provide your salary and is that what you want? Beatrice interrupted, her heart suddenly pounding. No, Vaughn said immediately. Then, more quietly, no, but I want you to be happy. And if this arrangement is making you unhappy, it's not, Beatrice said. She set down her glass and turned to face him. Vaughn, these past few weeks have been the happiest I've been in years, maybe ever. The library is part of that, yes, but you're part of it too. Something lit up in Vaughn's eyes. Truly, truly. I know this started as a practical arrangement, but I find myself caring about you. As a friend, certainly. And possibly as something more, though I'm not entirely sure what that means yet. Vaughn reached for her hand, the gesture becoming familiar now. I care about you too, Beatrice, more than I expected to when I made that impulsive proposal. You're brilliant and passionate and dedicated, and being around you makes me want to be better. You're already good, Beatrice said softly. You're kind and generous, and you see possibilities where others see problems. You've given me back my purpose. You gave that to yourself. I just provided some shelves and a room. Beatrice laughed, that full, genuine sound that had been rare in her life before now. We could argue about this all night. We could, Vaughn agreed. Or we could simply agree that we're good together and see where this goes. I'd like that, Beatrice said. Seeing where this goes, no more talk of annulments or ending the arrangement. We're partners and I'd like to remain so. Partners? Vaughn echoed, but the way he looked at her suggested he was hoping for more than that. And Beatrice found herself hoping for the same thing. The weeks turned into months and the library became the heart of the small community. Children came after school to read adventure stories. Farmers stopped by to check out agricultural guides. Women borrowed novels to read aloud to their families in the evenings. Beatrice organized a weekly reading club and started teaching literacy classes 3 evenings a week. Vaughn supported her in everything, helping expand the collection, building additional shelves as needed, and even leading a fundraising effort to establish a book purchasing fund. The community responded with surprising generosity, and by autumn, the library had enough money to order new books twice a year. But it was not just the library that flourished. Beatrice and Vaughn's relationship deepened with each passing day. They took to reading together in the evenings, sitting side by side on the porch or by the fire, sharing passages they enjoyed. They cooked together, worked together, and talked for hours about everything from philosophy to agriculture to their dreams for the future. One evening in late October, as they sat by the fireplace after a particularly successful day at the library, Vaughn set down his book and looked at Beatrice. "I have something to tell you," he said, his expression serious. Beatrice felt a flutter of nervousness. "What is it?" "I've received a letter from my father. He's ill, and my brother has asked me to return to Boston for a visit. I would be gone for perhaps 6 weeks, as the journey there and back takes considerable time." Beatrice's stomach dropped. 6 weeks without Vaughn. The thought was surprisingly painful. "When would you leave?" "I was planning to take the train next week. But Beatrice, I want you to come with me." She blinked in surprise. "To Boston?" "Yes, I want you to meet my family. I want to show you where I came from. And selfishly, I don't want to be apart from you for that long." Beatrice's heart raced. Meeting his family felt momentous, a step that would transform their practical arrangement into something undeniably real. "What about the library? Mrs. Chen has offered to oversee it while we're gone. She's become quite the avid reader lately. And Sarah Miller is old enough to help with the daily operations. The library will be fine for a few weeks. You've thought this through." "I have. But only if you want to come. I won't pressure you." Beatrice thought about Boston, about seeing the city Vaughn had described, meeting the family that had shaped him. More than that, she thought about 6 weeks with Vaughn, traveling together, seeing new places. The idea filled her with excitement. "I'll come," she said. "I'd like to see Boston. And I'd like to meet your family." The smile that broke across Vaughn's face was radiant. "Truly, you'll come, truly." He stood and pulled her to her feet, wrapping his arms around her in an embrace that lifted her off the ground. It was the most physical contact they had shared since their wedding kiss, and Beatrice found herself laughing and holding on tight. When he set her down, they were standing very close, his hands still on her waist, her hands resting on his shoulders. The laughter faded, replaced by something warmer and more intense. "Beatrice," Vaughn said softly, "may I kiss you?" "Yes," she whispered. This kiss was nothing like the brief peck at their wedding. This was slow and deep and full of all the feelings that had been building between them for months. Vaughn's hands came up to cup her face, and Beatrice felt herself melting into him, her fingers tangling in his hair. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," Vaughn admitted. "So have I," Beatrice confessed. "I just wasn't sure if I should." "We're married," Vaughn pointed out with a slight smile. "We're allowed to kiss." "We're married as a practical arrangement," Beatrice countered, but she was smiling too. "Are we still pretending that's all this is?" Beatrice looked into his amber eyes, saw the hope and affection there, and knew she could not pretend anymore. No, I don't think I can pretend that anymore." "Good," Vaughn said and kissed her again. They left for Boston the following Tuesday, taking the train from San Francisco. It was Beatrice's first time on a train, her first time traveling so far from home, and she found herself by turns excited and nervous. Vaughn was a patient travel companion, pointing out interesting sights as they crossed the country, ensuring she was comfortable, and entertaining her with stories of his childhood. They shared a sleeping compartment on the train, and on their third night of travel, as they lay in their respective berths in the darkness, Beatrice said, "Vaughn, are you awake?" "I am. Can't sleep. Not really. Too much excitement, I think." She heard him shift in his berth. "Would it help to talk, maybe? Tell me more about your father. I want to be prepared." Vaughn was quiet for a moment. "My father is a difficult man. Brilliant in business, less skilled at personal relationships. He loved my mother deeply, and her death broke something in him. He's never been quite whole since. You think he'll like me? I think he'll be surprised by you. He has very traditional views about women and marriage. But once he sees how intelligent and capable you are, he'll have to respect you. And my brother will like you immediately. He appreciates clever people. What about your younger brother, the one in the clergy? Thomas is in New York, but he's planning to visit while we're there. He's the gentlest of us three, always was. He'll probably quote scripture at you, but he means well." Beatrice laughed softly. "Your family sounds interesting." "That's a diplomatic way of putting it. They're complicated and sometimes infuriating, but they're family. And now you're part of that family too." The words warmed Beatrice through. She was part of something larger now, connected to people and places beyond her own small world. It was both terrifying and wonderful. Boston in November was cold and gray, so different from California's golden warmth. Beatrice bundled in her coat as they disembarked from the train, looking around at the bustling city with wide eyes. The crowds, the noise, the sheer number of people were overwhelming. Vaughn took her arm protectively. "Stay close. Boston can be confusing if you don't know it." They took a carriage to the Norton family home, a grand brick building in a wealthy neighborhood. Beatrice felt her nervousness increase as they approached. This was Vaughn's world, where he had grown up with privilege and education. What would his family think of her? a librarian from a small California town with no family connections or fortune. The door was opened by a butler, a dignified older man who greeted Vaughn with restrained pleasure. "Master Vaughn, welcome home. Your father is in the study. He's been expecting you." "Thank you, Higgins. This is my wife, Beatrice. Beatrice, this is Higgins, who has been tolerating our family for 30 years. The butler's expression warmed slightly. "Mrs. Norton, welcome. Might I say it is good to see Master Vaughn with a wife at last." Beatrice managed a smile despite her nerves. "Thank you, Higgins." Vaughn led her through the house, which was as grand inside as out. Expensive furniture, artwork on the walls, thick carpets underfoot. They arrived at a closed door, and Vaughn squeezed her hand reassuringly before knocking. "Come in," called a gruff voice. The study was lined with books, and Beatrice's eyes went immediately to them, cataloging titles and authors automatically. Behind a massive desk sat a man who was clearly Vaughn's father. He had the same strong features, though his dark hair was liberally streaked with silver. His eyes, when they landed on Beatrice, were sharp and assessing. "So this is the wife you mentioned in your letters," he said, standing slowly. He was thinner than Beatrice expected, his clothes hanging slightly loose. The illness Vaughn had mentioned was evident in his pallor. "Father, this is Beatrice. Beatrice, my father, Victor Norton." "Mr. Norton," Beatrice said, extending her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you." Victor shook her hand briefly, his grip firm despite his obvious illness. "You're younger than I expected, and prettier. Vaughn made it sound like you were some aging spinster librarian." "I'm 23, Beatrice said calmly, refusing to be intimidated. "Hardly ancient, though I suppose in some circles that might be considered approaching spinsterhood." A ghost of a smile crossed Victor's face. "She has spirit. That's good. You'll need it, married to my son. He gets his stubborn streak from me." "I thought I got it from Mother," Vaughn interjected dryly. "Your mother was the most stubborn woman I ever met. It's why I married her." Victor gestured to chairs by the fireplace. "Sit, both of you. Tell me about this library you've established." They spent the next hour talking about the library, about Petaluma, about Vaughn's ranch. Victor asked probing questions, and Beatrice found herself relaxing as the conversation focused on familiar topics. The older man was sharp and sometimes caustic, but she could see intelligence in his eyes and genuine interest in what they had accomplished. When they finally left the study, Vaughn wrapped an arm around her waist. "You were wonderful," he murmured. "I think you impressed him." "He's intimidating," Beatrice admitted. "He is, but he liked you. I could tell." They spent 2 weeks in Boston, and Beatrice found herself fascinated by the city. Vaughn took her to museums and libraries, showed her the shipyards where his family's business operated, and introduced her to countless relatives and family friends. His older brother, Vincent, was cordial but distant, clearly preoccupied with running the business. His younger brother Thomas arrived from New York and proved to be as gentle and kind as Vaughn had described. But it was the Norton family library that captured Beatrice's heart. Victor had finally unlocked it after years, and while some books had been damaged, many remained in good condition. Beatrice spent hours in that room, carefully assessing each volume, suggesting treatments for the damaged ones and reorganizing the collection. Victor found her there one afternoon, surrounded by stacks of books. "You're very like her, you know," he said quietly. "My wife." She used to sit exactly like that, completely absorbed in the books. Beatrice looked up. "Vaughn told me about her library. I'm sorry so many were lost. That was my fault. My grief was selfish." He moved slowly into the room, running his hand along a shelf. "She would have liked you. She always said intelligence was wasted on men since we were too arrogant to use it properly." Beatrice smiled. She sounds remarkable, she was, and she made me better than I would have been without her. Victor fixed Beatrice with a steady gaze. My son loves you, you know that, don't you? Beatrice's heart stuttered. He's never said. Vaughn doesn't say things easily. He's like me in that way. But I've watched him with you these past weeks. The way he looks at you, the way he defers to your opinion, the pride in his voice when he talks about your library. That's love, whether he said the words or not. I love him too, Beatrice said softly, realizing it was true even as she said it. Somewhere in the past months, her feelings had deepened from affection to something far more profound. Good, Victor said. Then you'll take care of each other. That's all any of us can do in this life. Their last night in Boston, Vaughn took Beatrice to dinner at a fine restaurant overlooking the harbor. The meal was exquisite, the wine excellent, but Beatrice could barely focus on any of it. She kept thinking about what Victor had said, about love and the words that had not yet been spoken. After dinner, they walked along the waterfront despite the cold. Vaughn wrapped his coat around Beatrice's shoulders and pulled her close. Thank you for coming with me, he said. These weeks have meant more than I can say. I'm glad I came. Your family is wonderful in their own complicated way. They love you, even my father who doesn't love easily. Vaughn stopped walking and turned to face her. Beatrice, there's something I need to tell you. She looked up at him, her heart pounding. What is it? I know our marriage started as a practical arrangement, a solution to your problem and my desire to help, but somewhere along the way it became something more, at least for me. He took her hands in his. I love you, Beatrice. I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you in that library, watching your world disappear and refusing to break, and every day since has just made me love you more. Tears spilled down Beatrice's cheeks. I love you too. I didn't expect to. I thought I could keep this practical and safe, but you made that impossible. You're too kind, too generous, too perfect. Vaughn laughed, a sound of pure joy, and pulled her into his arms. I'm far from perfect. You're perfect for me, Beatrice insisted. You gave me back my purpose, and then gave me something even more precious. You gave me love. They kissed there on the Boston waterfront, surrounded by the sounds of the city and the sea, and Beatrice felt a completeness she had never known before. This man, this impossible, wonderful man who had walked into her life and changed everything, was hers. And she was his. They returned to California in December, arriving home to find the library thriving under Mrs. Chen's capable management. The ranch looked beautiful in the winter light, and when Beatrice stepped into their home, she felt a rush of joy. This was truly home now, not just a place she lived, but a place she belonged. That night, for the first time, Beatrice went to Vaughn's room instead of her own. He looked up from his reading when she entered, surprise and hope mingling in his expression. I thought, she said softly, that we might not need separate bedrooms anymore, if you're amenable. Vaughn set his book aside and stood, crossing to her in 2 long strides. I'm very amenable to that idea. He kissed her with a passion that had been building for months, and Beatrice responded with equal fervor. This was right, she knew. This was what she wanted. Not just the practical partnership, but the intimacy and connection that came with true love. They made love that night with tenderness and care, learning each other's bodies as they had learned each other's minds. It was Beatrice's first time, and Vaughn was patient and gentle, making sure she felt only pleasure. When they finally lay tangled together in the aftermath, Beatrice felt tears on her cheeks again. Happy tears, Vaughn asked softly, wiping them away. So happy, she confirmed. I never knew it could be like this. Neither did I, he admitted. I've never felt this way about anyone. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and when Beatrice woke in the morning to find Vaughn watching her with soft eyes, She knew she had found something precious beyond measure. The months that followed were full of joy and purpose. The library continued to grow, adding more books and more patrons. Beatrice's literacy classes expanded, and she started a children's program on Saturday mornings where she would read stories aloud and help young readers develop their skills. Vaughn's ranch prospered as well. He had a natural talent for animal husbandry, and his small herd of cattle grew steadily. He hired more help and began to make a real success of the operation. But he always made time for the library, helping Beatrice with the heavy work and supporting her initiatives. In the spring, Beatrice realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with a complex mixture of joy and fear. She had always wanted children someday, but she had not expected it so soon, and there was the question of the library. How would she manage both? She told Vaughn one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. He was silent for a moment after her announcement, and Beatrice felt a flutter of nervousness. Then he let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was laughing and dizzy. "We're going to have a baby," he said, setting her down and kneeling to press his ear to her still flat stomach. "We're going to be parents." "You're happy?" Beatrice asked, though his reaction had made it clear. "I'm ecstatic." "Terrified and ecstatic. Are you happy?" "I am, and terrified as well. I don't know how I'll manage the library with a baby." "We'll figure it out together," Vaughn promised. "We always do. Maybe we can hire someone to help at the library a few days a week. Sarah Miller is 18 now and loves books. She might be interested." They talked late into the night, making plans and dreaming about the future. By the time they went to bed, Beatrice felt more settled. Whatever challenges came, they would face them together. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Beatrice continued working at the library through her 7th month, finally accepting Sarah Miller's help when climbing the ladder became too difficult. The young woman proved to be a natural, and Beatrice began training her in the more complex aspects of library management. In October, on a crisp autumn evening, Beatrice went into labor. The birth was long and difficult, but Vaughn stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and encouraging her. When their son finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Beatrice felt a love so intense it was almost painful. "He's beautiful," Vaughn said, tears streaming down his face as he held his son for the first time. "Beatrice, he's perfect." They named him Victor, after Vaughn's father, who had passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 months earlier. The baby had his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes, and from the start, he had both their stubborn determination. The first year of Victor's life was exhausting and wonderful. Beatrice learned to balance motherhood with her library work, bringing the baby with her sometimes and leaving him with Mrs. Rodriguez on others. Vaughn was a devoted father, rising for nighttime feedings and spending his evenings playing with his son. The library continued to thrive. With Sarah's help, Beatrice was able to expand the hours and start new programs. They added a children's section with small chairs and colorful books. They began hosting author visits and book discussions. The Norton Public Library became a true community center, a place where people gathered not just to borrow books, but to learn and connect. On their 3rd wedding anniversary, Vaughn surprised Beatrice by commissioning a portrait of the 3 of them. They sat for it together in the library, surrounded by books, baby Victor on Beatrice's lap and Vaughn's hand on her shoulder. When the finished portrait was unveiled, Beatrice found herself crying again. "We look like a real family," she said. "We are a real family," Vaughn corrected. "The realest thing I've ever been part of." 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, whom they named Alina after Vaughn's mother. She had her mother's blonde hair and her father's amber eyes, and from birth, she was fascinated by books. By the time she was 2, she would toddle into the library and pull books off the low shelves, insisting someone read to her. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The children grew, the library flourished, and the ranch prospered. Beatrice and Vaughn's love deepened with each passing year, maturing from the passionate intensity of new love into something steadier and more enduring. When Victor was 7 and Alina 5, a traveling photographer came through Petaluma. Beatrice arranged for him to take a photograph of the library, both inside and out. The resulting images showed a thriving institution. The shelves were packed with books, the reading areas were well used, and in the photograph of the interior, several patrons could be seen browsing the collection. "Look at what you've built," Vaughn said, studying the photographs. "What we've built," Beatrice corrected. "None of this would exist without you, and none of it would matter without you to bring it to life. You're the heart of this place, Beatrice. You always have been." On their 10th wedding anniversary, they threw a celebration at the library. The entire town was invited, and what seemed like half of Petaluma showed up. There were speeches about the library's impact, about the literacy rates that had risen, about the children who had learned to read, and the adults who had discovered a love of books. But for Beatrice, the best moment came when old Mrs. Henderson, who had learned to read at age 62 in Beatrice's literacy class, stood up to speak. "Before this library, before Mrs. Norton taught me my letters, I could not read my own grandchildren's letters from back east," she said, her voice wavering with emotion. "I felt stupid and ashamed. But Mrs. Norton never made me feel that way. She was patient and kind, and she gave me the gift of reading. Now I read to my grandchildren when they visit. I read the newspaper every morning. I just finished my first novel." She held up a copy of Jane Eyre. "This library changed my life." There was not a dry eye in the room. Beatrice stood to hug Mrs. Henderson, overwhelmed by the reminder of why she did this work. It was never about the books themselves. It was about the people the lives changed, the doors opened. That night, after the celebration ended and the children were asleep, Beatrice and Vaughn sat in the library alone. The setting sun cast long shadows across the shelves, and dust motes danced in the golden light. "You ever think about that first day?" Beatrice asked. "When you walked into the auction and bought all those books, I think about it often," Vaughn admitted. "It was the most impulsive thing I've ever done, and the best decision I've ever made. I thought you were insane, a crazy cowboy with more money than sense." Vaughn laughed. "I was half insane, definitely besotted. You were besotted, then. We'd barely met. I saw you standing there, watching your dreams being sold off piece by piece, and you weren't crying or begging or giving up. You were standing there with your head high, taking it all with dignity. And I thought, that's a woman of remarkable strength. I wanted to know you. So I bought books I didn't need and made an insane proposal, all because I couldn't bear to watch you lose everything." Beatrice reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together as she had so many times over the years. "You gave me everything, Vaughn, not just the books or the library. You gave me a home, a family, a partnership. You gave me love." "We gave it to each other," Vaughn said. "That's how the best things work. Not one person giving and the other taking, but both contributing, both building something together." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, surrounded by thousands of books, each one a story, each one a world. Their own story was written in this room, in the ranch beyond, in their children sleeping peacefully in their beds. It was a good story, Beatrice thought. The kind worth reading. The years continued to pass. Victor grew into a serious boy who loved mathematics and engineering. Alina was all passion and creativity, writing her own stories and illustrating them with elaborate drawings. Beatrice taught them both to love books and learning, while Vaughn taught them about responsibility and hard work. When Victor was 12, he asked his parents how they had met. Beatrice and Vaughn exchanged glances across the dinner table, and then Beatrice began to tell the story. "I was about to lose all my books," she said. "Your grandfather had debts, and everything I owned was being sold. I stood in the old library watching strangers buy the books I loved, and I thought my life was over. And then I walked in," Vaughn continued, "and saw your mother standing there like a queen watching her kingdom fall, and I knew I had to do something. So you bought the books?" Alina asked, her eyes wide. "I bought every remaining book," Vaughn confirmed. 15 crates worth. Your mother thought I was crazy." "I did," Beatrice agreed, smiling at the memory. "But he said he wanted to build me shelves, proper shelves for a proper library." "And then he proposed marriage," Vaughn added. "About 20 minutes after we met." Both children gasped. "You didn't," Victor exclaimed. "I did. It made sense at the time, though your mother quite rightly thought I was insane." "But I said yes eventually," Beatrice said softly, meeting Vaughn's eyes. "Because sometimes the crazy choices are the right ones, and because your father saw me, really saw me, when I felt invisible." "That's so romantic," Alina sighed. "It's impractical," Victor countered, but he was smiling. "Love often is," Vaughn said, "but that doesn't make it wrong." That night, after the children were in bed, Beatrice and Vaughn took their customary walk around the property. The library stood solid and welcoming, lamplight glowing in its windows. Sarah Miller, now the assistant librarian and married with children of her own, was inside preparing for the next day's programs. "We built something good here," Beatrice said, leaning into Vaughn's side. "We did," he agreed, "and it will outlast us. That library will serve people long after we're gone. What a legacy. Our children are our legacy too, and this ranch, these buildings, this life we've created together, all of it matters." Beatrice thought about the girl she had been, standing in that auction room watching her world crumble. She could never have imagined this future. A loving husband, 2 beautiful children, a library that served hundreds of people. It was more than she had dared to dream. "I love you," she said, stopping to face Vaughn under the stars. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," he replied, kissing her forehead. "My brilliant, beautiful, impossible wife who took a chance on a crazy cowboy. Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Vaughn corrected with a smile. "The best was agreeing to run the library in the first place." Everything else followed from that. They walked back to the house hand in hand, their path lit by moonlight and the certain knowledge of their love. Behind them, the library stood as a monument to an impulsive act of generosity, and a practical arrangement that had become the greatest love story either of them had known. The years continued to unfold with the gentle rhythm of a life well lived. Beatrice watched her children grow, guided students in their learning, and expanded the library's collection with each passing year. Vaughn's ranch became one of the most successful in the county, but he never lost sight of what mattered most: his family and the community institution they had built together. When Beatrice turned 40, the town threw a celebration in honor of her 20 years of service to the library. The building had been expanded twice by then, with new wings added to accommodate the growing collection. What had started with 15 crates of rescued books had become a library of over 5,000 volumes. Speeches were given, testimonials shared. Dozens of people stood to talk about how Beatrice had changed their lives through literacy education and access to books. Former students, now adults with children of their own, spoke of the opportunities reading had opened for them. It was overwhelming and humbling and deeply moving. But the moment that made Beatrice cry came when Victor, now 20 years old and studying engineering at university, stood to speak. "My mother taught me that books are freedom," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the crowded room. "She showed me that knowledge is power, and that learning never stops. But more than that, she showed me what it means to dedicate yourself to something larger than your own interests. This library exists because she refused to give up, even when everything seemed lost. And it thrives because she pours her heart into it every single day. Mother, you are my hero, you always have been." Eleanor, 17 and already showing promise as a writer, spoke next. "My mother gave me my love of stories. She read to me every night when I was small, and she never made me feel foolish for dreaming of being a writer. She said the world needs stories, and she was right. Stories connect us, teach us, help us understand ourselves and others. Everything I want to do with my life comes from lessons she taught me in this library." When Beatrice stood to respond, she could barely speak through her tears. "I had a dream once of a library," she managed finally. "A place where anyone could come to learn and grow and discover new worlds. But I could never have built it alone. My husband gave me the space and the support to make that dream real. This community embraced the library and made it thrive. My children remind me every day why this work matters. I am the luckiest woman alive, not because of what I've accomplished, but because of the people I've been blessed to accomplish it with." Vaughn came to stand beside her, wrapping his arm around her waist. "We're the lucky ones," he said to the crowd. "To have Beatrice in our lives, to benefit from her wisdom and dedication and love. She saw possibility where others saw only loss. She built something beautiful from nothing, and she's made all of us better in the process." The celebration continued late into the evening, but eventually, the crowd dispersed, and Beatrice and Vaughn found themselves alone in the library once again. They walked through the familiar space, Beatrice's fingers trailing along the spines of books she knew by heart. 20 years, she marveled. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. "I know what you mean," Vaughn said. "I can still see you as you were that first day, so fierce and brave and beautiful." "I wasn't brave, I was terrified. You can be both. In fact, that's the very definition of bravery, being terrified and doing the thing anyway." Beatrice leaned against the shelves, studying her husband. At 47, he had silver threading through his dark hair and lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But to her, he was as handsome as ever. More so, perhaps, because she knew him so completely now. Every quirk and habit, every strength and flaw, and she loved all of it. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "The impulsive proposal, the instant marriage, taking on someone else's problems?" "Never," Vaughn said immediately. "Not for a single moment. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Beatrice. You and our children and this life we've built. I'd make the same choice 1,000 times over. Even though I was a terrible cook at first, especially because of that. Your culinary disasters gave me a chance to be useful." Beatrice laughed. "I've improved." "You have. Though I still remember the Great Chicken Incident of 1877 with a mixture of horror and amusement. We agreed never to speak of that again." They were still laughing as they locked up the library and walked home through the quiet night. The ranch was peaceful, the house welcoming. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and an owl hooted its response. Inside, they prepared for bed with the easy familiarity of long marriage. Beatrice sat at her dressing table, unpinning her hair while Vaughn changed into his nightshirt. In the mirror, she could see him watching her with soft eyes. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I'm grateful for all of this, for you." Beatrice turned to face him. "Come here." He crossed to her and she stood to meet him. They embraced a full-body connection that spoke of comfort and passion and deep abiding love. "We did good, didn't we?" Beatrice murmured against his chest. "We did very good. We're still doing good. What comes next, do you think?" "The children will both be gone soon, off living their own lives. The library runs smoothly with Sarah's help. What's the next chapter for us?" Vaughn pulled back to look at her. "Whatever we want it to be. We could travel, see the world beyond California and Boston. We could write a book about establishing rural libraries. We could simply enjoy each other's company and the work we've built. The beauty of our life together is that we get to choose." "I like that," Beatrice said. "The freedom to choose. It's what you gave me all those years ago. The choice to build something new instead of losing everything." "We gave that to each other," Vaughn insisted. "I chose to help you. You chose to trust me. We chose to build a life together. Every choice since has been ours, made together." They climbed into bed, settling into their familiar positions, Beatrice tucked against Vaughn's side, his arm around her shoulders. It was how they had slept for years, how they would sleep for years more, God willing. "I love you," Beatrice said into the darkness. "I love you too," Vaughn replied. "My brave librarian who saved her books and stole my heart. Your crazy cowboy who bought books he didn't need and built shelves for a stranger. Best investment I ever made." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other and in the life they had created. Outside, the library stood as a testament to their partnership, its shelves filled with books that would educate and inspire generations to come. But inside the house, in their shared bed, was the real treasure. A love that had started as a practical arrangement and become the foundation of everything good in their lives. The seasons turned, as they always do. Victor graduated from university and took a position with a large engineering firm in San Francisco, though he visited home regularly. Elena enrolled at a women's college back east, studying literature and writing. Her letters home were full of excitement and discovery, and both Beatrice and Vaughn read them aloud to each other with pride. With the children grown, Beatrice and Vaughn did indeed begin to travel. They visited San Francisco frequently, attended plays and concerts, explored the growing city. They traveled to New York to see Elena and spent time in museums and libraries. They even took a trip to Europe, where Beatrice spent hours in the great libraries of London and Paris, while Vaughn patiently accompanied her, offering observations and asking thoughtful questions. But they always came home to Petaluma, to the ranch and the library. It was their center, their purpose, their heart. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the town commissioned a plaque for the library. It read, "The Norton Public Library, established 1876 by Vaughn and Beatrice Norton. A testament to the power of books, the value of education, and the strength of partnership." Beatrice stood before it, reading the words over and over, Vaughn's hand warm in hers. "Partnership," she said softly. "That was always the perfect word for us." "It still is," Vaughn agreed. "Partners in everything. Building the library, raising our children, living this life. I couldn't have asked for a better partner. Nor could I." They spent that anniversary evening as they had spent so many others, sitting in the library after closing, surrounded by books and memories, and the quiet satisfaction of work well done. Sarah Miller, now in her 40s and still the assistant librarian, had decorated the space with flowers and left a bottle of wine with 2 glasses on the reading table. "To 25 years," Vaughn said, raising his glass. "To partnership," Beatrice added. "To love that started as practicality and became everything." They drank, and then Vaughn pulled Beatrice to her feet. "Dance with me. There's no music. We'll make our own." So they danced in the quiet library, humming a waltz they both knew, moving slowly around the reading area. The books watched silently, witnesses to a love story that had unfolded among their pages. "I wish we could freeze this moment," Beatrice said. "Keep it forever." "We have it forever," Vaughn replied. "Not the moment itself, but what it represents, our love, our life, our partnership." "That's eternal, Beatrice. That transcends time. When did you become a poet?" "The day I met you. You bring out the romantic in me." Beatrice laughed, that full, genuine sound that had become more frequent over the years. "I love you, Vaughn Norton, with everything I am." "And I love you, Beatrice Norton, with everything I am and everything I'll ever be." The years continued their gentle march. Beatrice and Vaughn grew older together, their hair turning silver, their movements slower but no less purposeful. The library celebrated its 40th anniversary, then its 50th. Victor married and had children of his own, bringing them to visit their grandparents and the library where their family story had begun. Eleanor became a successful novelist, dedicating her first book to my mother, who taught me to love stories, and my father, who taught me that love itself is the greatest story. When Beatrice was 70, she finally agreed to retire from the library's day-to-day operations. Sarah's daughter, Maria, took over as head librarian, carrying on the tradition of service and education that Beatrice had established so many years before. But Beatrice still visited almost daily, shelving books, reading to children, and helping patrons find exactly what they needed. Vaughn, now 74, had handed the ranch operations to a manager, but still rode out to check the herds most days. He was slower now, his joints stiff with age, but his eyes still held that warm amber light that had captured Beatrice's heart all those years ago. One evening in late spring, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset as they had done thousands of times before, Beatrice said, "Do you remember what you told me the first time we sat here together, after you'd proposed and I'd agreed?" "I told you we'd figure everything out together," Vaughn replied, "and we did." "We did," Beatrice agreed. "Every challenge, every joy, every moment, we faced it all together. Best partnership I could have imagined. Best love story, too." Vaughn reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "The story isn't over yet. We have more chapters to write." "I hope so. I'm not ready for it to end. Neither am I. We have grandchildren to spoil and books to read and sunsets to watch. We have a lifetime of love still to live." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. In the distance, the library stood solid and enduring, its windows glowing with light as Maria prepared for the next day's programs. It was a legacy that would outlast them both, touching lives they would never know. But here, on this porch, in these chairs worn smooth by years of use, was their real legacy. A love that had started as an impossible solution to an impossible problem and become the foundation of a beautiful life. A partnership built on respect and affection and shared purpose. A story that had begun with books and grown to encompass everything that mattered. "I would do it all again," Beatrice said softly. "Every moment, every choice." "So would I," Vaughn agreed. "Every single moment. Especially the moment I walked into that auction room and saw you standing there, refusing to break. My crazy cowboy who bought books for a stranger. My brave librarian who took a chance on a mad proposal." The sun set completely, stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere an owl called, and the evening breeze brought the scent of grass and wildflowers. Vaughn and Beatrice sat hand in hand, surrounded by the life they had built, the love they had nurtured, and the certain knowledge that whatever time remained to them would be spent together as it had always been in the end. That was all that mattered. Not the library, though it was important. Not the ranch, though it had prospered. not even their children and grandchildren, though they were dearly loved. What mattered was this: two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful together, and who had loved each other fiercely and faithfully through all the years of their lives. Their story, like all the best stories, was one of transformation. The lonely cowboy from Boston who had come west seeking purpose. The desperate librarian watching her dreams crumble. Two strangers who became partners, then lovers, then the center of each other's worlds. It was a story written in the shelves they had built together, in the books they had saved, in the lives they had touched through education and opportunity. It was written in their children's faces and their grandchildren's laughter. It was written in every sunset they had watched from this porch, every challenge they had faced together, every quiet moment of connection and understanding. And though someday the story would end, as all stories must, its impact would continue. In the library that bore their name, in the community they had served, in the family they had created, and in the example they had set of what partnership and love could be. But on that spring evening, with stars emerging overhead and their hands clasped together, Vaughn and Beatrice Norton were not thinking about endings. They were thinking about the gift of this moment, this love, this life they had built from nothing but a crazy impulse and a desperate need and a willingness to take a chance on the impossible. "Thank you," Beatrice said, breaking the silence. "For what?" "For walking into that auction room. For buying my books, for building me shelves, for giving me a life beyond anything I could have imagined." "Thank you," Vaughn replied, "for saying yes to a stranger's mad proposal, for trusting me, for loving me, for being the best partner and the greatest love of my life." They rose together, moving with the careful synchronization of long habit, and walked into their home. Behind them, the stars continued to emerge, and the library stood solid against the night sky, a monument to what two people could build together when they combined vision with love, practicality with passion, and the courage to believe in impossible things. Their story, begun in desperation and built through partnership, had become exactly what every great love story should be: a testament to the transformative power of love, the importance of choosing each other every day, and the beautiful truth that sometimes the most practical arrangements can lead to the most impractical, impossible, wonderful love. And in the quiet evening in the house they had shared for decades, Vaughn and Beatrice held each other close, grateful for every moment, every choice, every chapter of the story they had written together. A story that would endure in the library they had built, in the family they had created, and most importantly, in the love that had sustained them through all the years of their lives. It was, they both knew, the very best kind of happily ever after.